Hello and welcome to week 3 of Making Peace with Screens and Gaming. Now, this week I'm going to be talking about a couple of different topics. And to start with, I'm going to talk about how to deal with problems with your children's technology use. And I want to first say that we've sort of talked about this right from the start, that there's different ways to approach this issue of problems. And we've talked about how we can really open up our perspective on what we consider a problem by questioning our beliefs about that situation or questioning our judgments about what's actually happening. And hopefully that has actually helped to open things up a bit for you, shift your perspective on what your children are engaged with. But there may still be things you consider to be a problem, either now or there may be things that come up in future that you think are a problem. So I think it's really helpful to have some tools to deal with problems when they come up. And I'm assuming that you've probably tried some things in the past that haven't worked so well for you. I mean, if you've tried to control your children's technology use, or you've tried to limit it or persuade them off it, or whatever different things you've tried, I'm kind of assuming that hasn't really worked very well for you. And I assume that because you're here wanting to investigate this issue further. So let's assume that there are some problems. What I want to do is suggest that you really investigate the nature of the problem that might be occurring, sort of zoom in and pull it apart a bit rather than just sort of crash in and try to fix things. So one of the tools that I find really helpful is to really consider whose problem is it. Okay, so on one hand, your child might actually be asking for your help. So they might be explicitly saying, I really need your help with this, I'm struggling, or they might be telling you that they think they've got a problem, but they're not necessarily explicitly asking for help, but they're basically owning the fact that they've got some sort of issue or problem. Okay, so if your child is asking for help, then it's kind of easy to offer help that they might, that they might find useful. They might not find the sort of help you're offering to be what they were after, but at least they've actually asked for help. Okay, so that's a relatively clear-cut situation. That's not normally what you're going to come up against, though. Normally what's going to happen is you'll find yourself saying there's a problem, and you'll find yourself complaining about something that your children are doing, or worrying about what they're doing, or reacting in anger or frustration, or you'll find yourself yelling and having this stress around an issue. And conventional approach is to say, well, my child has a problem, they've got a problem with gaming. They've got a problem, they're addicted or they're obsessed or, whatever it is, they've got the problem. But what I'm suggesting here is that if I'm the one that's actually complaining and reacting and yelling, for example, then in fact, it's actually my problem. So rather than project it and blame the child, if I own the problem, if I own my problem, it's much more honest, okay? And it's a much clearer basis on which to communicate with your child if you're actually willing to own the fact that you've got the problem. Okay, so that's the sort of starting point for me, is working out, well, whose problem is this, right? And if it's my problem, then I've learned a particular way of communicating about this, which is based on what's called nonviolent communication, which there's a book about that. I think I've put it in the resources section in the course document, but if I haven't, I'll remember to do that. So I've modified it. I've simplified nonviolent communication, and I call it speaking from the heart. It's basically just being as honest as I can about my problem. So just to break it down for you, I make an observation about what I'm seeing. Then I say how I'm feeling about that and what I want in the situation. And I basically make a request of my child. So to give you an example, my observation might be, and I'm speaking this to my child, so when you stay up playing online late at night, okay, so this is my observation. They're up playing on their computers late at night, say after 11 o'clock. So that is an observation, but there's no judgment attached to that. It's just, this is what I'm seeing. You're up at this hour. And then my feeling is, I feel angry and upset or frustrated, something like that. And then what do I want? I feel angry and upset because I want to go to sleep at that time. And I can't sleep if you're playing a computer game outside my bedroom door. So that's my observation, my feeling about that situation, my statement of what I want, and then I make a request. So my request might be, would you be willing to turn off your computer or device at 10:30 so that I can get some sleep? Because I've got to get up at 7 o'clock tomorrow and I don't want to be really tired. So would you be willing to is a really useful set of words that I find helpful in making requests. So it makes it very clear that this is a request, it's not a demand, right? So that's ideally what I'm trying to convey to my children. I've got a request. I'm not going to force you to do anything. I'm asking you, are you willing to do this? All right. And I can be quite assertive about this. I can repeat it a number of times, but it's still a request, not a demand. So if I phrase my problem in that way, in terms of a request and being honest about how I feel, then to me, that's the most honest I can be about the situation. And it's also, it's not conveying any blame or judgment of the child. So it's actually, it's less likely to get a big reaction from them or to get them defensive or to feeling like you're out to get them or whatever. So it's a way of communicating which is most likely to get a positive response. But of course, it doesn't always get a positive response. There are lots and lots of times when I have made a really clear, heartfelt, you know, I've been vulnerable about how I felt. I might have even been in tears. I've made this request. Can you please, please, please do X, Y, or Z? And the answer has been no. And it's like, oh, okay, what do I do now? Right? So that's what we've got to deal with. You know, what do we do when what we want for ourselves and what a child wants for themselves, what happens when they're in conflict? Okay, this is what I call a problem. You know, this is a conflict situation which is bound to come up, you know, in families. These sort of conflicts between what different people want are inevitable, right? And you know, it can kind of freak people out a bit because some people are really anxious around conflicts, but I think that's probably mostly because, you know, in our culture, a lot of conflicts are resolved by people exercising power over other people. And we've all had power exercised over us in the past by our own parents or at school or somewhere like that. So often we've got, you know, some baggage around these issues, and that's not at all surprising. So it's good to be aware of that. But conflicts will still arise. So I had to learn how to deal with that. And I read a brilliant book called Parent Effectiveness Training by Thomas Gordon, which I've also put in the resources document. And he talks about problem solving with your children. So you could call it cooperative problem solving. I call it creative problem solving because it is actually a very creative, open process. So again, I've like read all these books and sort of adapted things, simplified them, and used them in my family. So when I get a situation where what I want and what my child wants conflict, and let's take the bedtime sort of example, because that was one that did come up often in our family. The kids would want to play later and later, you know, and my husband needed to get up to go to work, and I just really need a good night's sleep, you know, don't we all? So there was conflict around this. So we had to work something out, right? So the key for me in this process is to include the children in helping to find a solution. In fact, everybody in the family was an equal participant in terms of finding the solution. So I would ask the children to help us to find a solution that everyone is happy with or can at least accept. And I would basically say, look, there's this conflict, we've got a problem. I really, really need for us to find a solution that everybody's happy with. And I'm basically going to keep bringing up this issue until we find that solution, right? And sometimes we would actually sit down and like have a family meeting. At other times, it was just something we discussed, you know, on an ongoing sort of basis, or it would, you know, flare up from time to time. So it can be quite an involved process, which I actually, there's a whole chapter in my book, Joyful Parenting, about this. But to just simplify it for this issue, essentially, the key is not to focus on the problem, like definitely not focus on any sort of blame. You're doing this, you're doing that, you know, whose fault is that? It's absolutely counterproductive in my experience to talk about fault or really to go over, you know, the problem. This is a really solution focused process. And finding that solution it really helps to repeatedly ask everybody involved what they want. So, you know, what do you want? How can we all get what we want? And throw it wide open in terms of people offering possible solutions. So basically, you know, brainstorm. Anything goes. Just tell me what you think a solution might be. Ask the kids. And often, you know, they've got a really interesting left field sort of idea that can sometimes be workable and can sometimes be, you know, much more creative than something I can think up. So as part of this process, also sometimes things will come up for me, like thoughts about, oh, they really should, you know, be helping me get what I want, or they should be doing what they're told, or they should respect me more, or, you know, all those sort of should thoughts tend to come up as part of this process, because this process is very different to the way I was brought up. It's very different to a conventional parenting model where basically the parent decides what's the best and the kids just go along with that. Okay, so it will bring up these thoughts, and I found it very useful to use that process of the work that I talked about last week, that the self-inquiry, to investigate my thoughts and beliefs about this situation while we were trying to find a solution. So the more I can get clear of my sort of beliefs or judgments about my children or about this situation, the more it opens things up to more creative solutions, more possibilities. So the more open-minded I can be, the more solutions we've got to choose from. So I actually found it really helpful not to try and think through to get a solution, but really to try and find some intuitive guidance, to sort of feel into it rather than, you know, think it out. And as I said, open it right up to whatever solutions the children had to offer, or anybody else who was involved. So when a solution appeared, then we needed to make an agreement. We talked about it, about making agreements. So we might, for example, come up with an agreement that the boys would agree to turn their computers off at 10 p.m., for example, and go into their rooms, and you know, it was lights out time. That agreement is not enforceable in any way. So there are no consequences or punishments or anything attached to that. It's basically an agreement only so long as everybody agrees to it. So if it proves to be the case that they can't stick to that, or they've changed their mind or whatever, then basically we just have to go back into the process and find a solution that everybody is willing to stick with and that is going to work. So sometimes those agreements can stick for quite a long period of time. In other situations, I found it really was a matter of an ongoing process that we would keep talking about agreements, and they would change over time. Of course, they do need to change over time because people change. You know, kids grow up, what they're doing changes, what their interests change. So it was really helpful to see it as an ongoing process rather than okay, we've got an agreement, you know, this is it, because it hardly ever you know, really worked like that. Although there were situations where it was time critical, you know. For example, we had an outing that was organized and they were all online or whatever, and it was like, we're supposed to be at this particular event or group or whatever in an hour, and you're still online, so there's a problem. You know, are you going to stay on your computers, or are we actually going to get to this thing that we've organized in advance? And when it's sort of time critical, those were the times when I would just say, all right, I'm just going to sit here or stand here, and we're just going to wait. I'm not going anywhere until we find, you know, a solution that everybody's happy with. And, you know, all sorts of things were usually considered. This would come up repeatedly in our family over, you know, visits to grandparents or family, extended family sort of things. And I would always feel so conflicted, because I knew, you know, there were all these expectations that we were going to be at this family thing, and my kids were like, no, we just want to play games, and I'm going, no. But anyway, so we had to be pretty creative. We came up with all sorts of different solutions for those situations. We would take devices, we would take laptops, we would take friends, we would, you know, all sorts of different combinations of things were thrown up, and we always did find a solution. But yeah, sometimes there was some pretty emotional moments in that process as well. So yeah, that was part of it. Being willing to be open and vulnerable about what I wanted and how much I wanted it was part of the process. You know, my kids weren't shy about expressing their feelings, so I learned not to be shy about expressing mine as well. So I found that to be a really valuable process. We used it, like I started using this creative problem solving process when my eldest was like 4 years old. So we used it for, you know, 15 years. And it was incredibly empowering, really, for all of us. It did feel quite frustrating at times as well, because things took longer to resolve than if I could have just said, right, that's it, turn it off, we're going out the door. But my relationship with my kids just didn't really work that way. So we had to find another way of doing things. So that's a process that I highly recommend, and I'm quite happy to talk you through some more examples of that if you're interested. Now, I want to change topic a bit now and talk about home education legal requirements. I know that most of you are probably home educating, but not necessarily everybody. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this topic, but it is sort of relevant to any situation, even where children are at school, because essentially it's all about observing without judgment. So it's about leaving your beliefs and judgments to one side and just sort of zooming in and observing what your children are actually doing and what they're actually learning as they're engaged in their technology use, whatever form that technology use may be. So if you can like watch over their shoulder or play with them, then you're going to get a very up close view of what they're actually learning. And that's the ideal scenario, really, in terms of observation, is to be right there with them, watching or playing with them, because particularly if you're playing with them, you get a really, really good sense of the skills that are involved in what they're actually doing. And I was just astonished by the skill level that was required to play many of the games that my sons were playing, and the problem solving ability. And gosh, I mean, I basically couldn't play most of the games that they were playing because their problem solving ability and their skill level was just so much more advanced than mine. So I was usually sitting there going, what the hell? How are you doing this? And they would try and explain it to me, and I'm going, oh my goodness. Okay, right. All right. So sometimes I actually had to go off and Google for myself to find out more about these games. And okay, I often would, if I had a registration coming up, I would go and Google, you know, what are my kids learning in ... you know, as Minecraft or, you know, whatever game it was, educational benefits of ... you know, and I would actually go in and research some of the games to get more of an idea of of what other people thought was actually being learnt in those games, because sometimes it was a bit hard for me to follow what was going on because it was all happening so fast. So that's one thing, really close observation, a lot of conversation. As much as my children were open to, I would ask questions about like what's going on here and what are you doing there and how do you figure that bit out, and really sort of lean in to see what they were actually doing. And then also zoom out. So zoom out in terms of the time frames for learning. So rather than sort of view things in terms of, okay, this school year or this term 1, 2, 3, 4, we're supposed to be learning X, Y, and Z. It really helped enormously if I could just take the time pressure off completely my children's learning journey and zoom out on that and say, okay, well, there isn't actually a legal requirement that they learn, you know, this, and this in grade 3. The curriculum says this is desirable that they learn these particular skills in this particular age, but it's not legally required that they learn that. As home educating parents, we're legally required to offer our children a program of study, a program of study that follows the curriculum, but there's no requirement that we force them to do anything or force them to learn anything. We just need to offer them resources and a program of study. So if your children are actually learning something, then look at it over a long time period and you will see amazing learning leaps happen. If you zoom out and look at it over months or years, then you will see much more learning that is happening over a longer time frame. So, and also learning will happen when it's relevant for the child. You know, when they need a particular skill, then they'll be highly motivated to learn that. So if they need to write or read or do a certain maths calculation in order to play the game that they're playing online, or communicate with their friends online, or learn how to, you know, construct a particular spaceship, or, you know, learn their coding skills, or learn how to make their YouTube videos, or whatever it is they're doing, once the skills are necessary for them to achieve their chosen objective, their motivation will take them in huge leaps of learning in really rapid time frames. And it's been incredible, really, to see that process operating with my kids. So the other aspect I'd like to mention there is it's really important to keep records, if you're home educating, of what your child is doing while they're actually engaged with technology. So if you've got a big judgment about technology use and you're basically sort of pushing it away or trying to ignore it or disengaged with what your child is doing, then you're less likely to be keeping those records. But I found it really helpful, as I said, to really lean in and ask my kids to take screenshots of particular, text or, things that were coming up in the games. I would ask them to take screenshots. I would keep notes of conversations that we had. So they might ask me questions or they would be sharing something. I would take notes, or sometimes, they would go into real detail about the particular story or the background of a video they'd watched or a game they were playing. And I would actually make an audio recording of them recounting their story or creating a storyline. So I actually got pretty creative about keeping the records. So I would take photos, I would use screenshots, I had audio recordings, I had notes of conversations, notes of calculations, all sorts of things to demonstrate that the learning was actually taking place, even though my children were very rarely ever willing to sit down with a pen and paper or, read something that wasn't actually on a screen. I mean, they were doing environmental reading, in the house or the street or whatever, but there weren't a lot of books being read, for example, but there was a hell of a lot of text being read on the screens. So just bring all of that into your homeschool record keeping and you'll be amazed at how much you can cover out of the curriculum with your children engaged in those that technology use. And then, of course, you can supplement with whatever else they're doing in the rest of their lives. But there's so much happening when they're actually using this technology that you'll find over time it really covers most of the bases. And if there are big gaps, I used to also just ask my kids, okay, we're coming up for a homeschool inspection. How about you sit down and write a couple of pages or do a couple of pages of this workbook, just so I can have a few samples, to show. Please, I made a request. And usually they would be willing to, cough up and sit down and do a little bit of more traditional schoolwork type stuff. Even if it was only a couple of pages, that was really all that was needed for the for that registration process, at least in New South Wales. I can't speak for all jurisdictions, but it worked for me. So again, another switch of topic, although it's related to this, is how to deal with judgments from outside the family. So this is related because part of the reason I used to find the whole registration process really stressful is because I was really scared of the judgment of the inspector or getting criticised or refused, worst case scenario, being told that this was just not good enough and sorry, you have to send your kids back to school. That whole not good enough thing was just, I was really, really sensitive to it. And I used to get really upset when people from outside our family would express their judgments or criticism of what my children were doing, or how much they were on technology, or how much they were gaming, or the fact that they hadn't learned to read yet, or they weren't doing, you know, workbooks, or whatever the criticism was. I felt really, really sensitive and defensive about those criticisms for many years. And I used to get so much of it coming in my direction. It was like the more sensitive I was, the more people would just sort of hone in and just dump all this stuff on me. So I had a huge issue going with my parents for like 10 years because they just absolutely hated the whole idea of home education. They hated the fact that my kids were really into gaming. They were just totally freaked out by it, really stressed, and they were just really judgmental. So I had lots and lots of opportunities to learn how to deal with judgment from outside our family, and even inside my family. My husband would periodically sort of freak out as well, and it's like, what are you doing with our children? This is going to be a disaster, you know. And I'm going, yeah, well, yeah, you could be right. But so what I learned after very, very careful sort of investigation of what was actually going on for me in these moments was, I figured out that basically I was only sensitive and having this big reaction because what was being said by others mirrored my own inner critic. So people would say, this is not good enough, what you're doing. And I would react because I actually had a voice in my head that was saying the same thing. So there was an inner critic, a voice in my head, which was often saying, you're not good enough, and you're negligent, or you're not doing enough for your children. You should be teaching them, or, you know, this is really risky and it's going to end badly, or all these sort of negative self-talk is another way of describing it. So I had this inner critic that was quite active, and when people around me basically judged me, I just sort of, I felt crushed because I believed them. I believed that voice that says I'm not good enough, or this isn't good enough. So I figured out, okay, it's basically an opportunity. When that criticism comes from outside, it's an opportunity for me to examine that inner voice and my own self-judgments, and to use that process of investigation and self-inquiry to question my own thoughts, to question my thoughts about myself. So if my mum said, you're a negligent parent, you know, this is not good enough, then I would go home and I would write out the work, you know, am I, you know, I'm a negligent parent, you know, is this true? And I would go through the questions and I would investigate whether I believed that I was negligent. And it was a very interesting process, actually. And it certainly, all that inner critic didn't go away in a hurry. It was a real process that I had to go through to sort of quiet that inner critic down. But I came through that process of awareness and self-inquiry and asking those questions. I came to recognize that inner voice much more quickly. So I would have a reaction, or I would get defensive, and then I would just realize, I think, oh my goodness, I'm actually believing that I'm not good enough, or I'm believing that I'm negligent, or that I'm not a good mother, or something. And the realization that that's what I'd been thinking was enough to sort of bounce me out of that belief. So I would have a reaction and then it would pass more quickly because I had a more awareness of what was actually going on, that I had this inner critic that was basically tripping me up. And the more I did that, the work, the more I investigated my beliefs, basically the inner critic would come up and I would be onto it. It was like, no, I know that's not true. I know I'm good enough because I've investigated this again and again and again. And eventually that inner critic has gone quiet. So these days, if there's a judgment coming from outside, it's pretty much like water off a duck's back. It's like, no, I'm good. I know I'm doing what I'm doing. I'm doing the best, that I can in this situation, and that's good enough. So the good enough replaced the not good enough story. So now there's a pretty solid foundation of, yeah, this is good enough. And that is a much, much more comfortable place to live from and a much less stressful way of being. So that's a little bit of an unconventional sort of approach, I think, to dealing with judgments from outside. But it was really profound for me to realize that I had this inner critic and I didn't actually have to believe that voice in my head. And it's actually enabled me to be much more compassionate with myself, but also much more compassionate and understanding of other people, because I see people getting really anxious and really judgmental. And I understand now that a lot of that comes from fear and self-judgment. And I understand that because I've seen that in myself. So what is out there is a mirror for what is actually going on internally. And the more peace I've found within myself, the less I'm affected by what's going on out there. And in fact, the less affected I am, the more it just falls away. I mean, my parents have completely given up worrying about any of that. And and ultimately they saw that all the things they feared didn't come to pass. Everything worked out just fine. So, it has all worked out really, really well. And I guess I'm just hoping that I can give you the confidence to sort of take a shortcut and not feel so defensive and not feel so stressed that as I did for years, and just sort of take a bit of a leap into, okay, we can actually just really focus on connecting with our kids, seeing what they're really passionate and interested in, supporting them in that, and offering them support and resources to support their interest, to support it branching out in all sorts of different ways. And through that process, actually be there sort of alongside our kids as their interests develop, rather than have this gulf between us and them of technology, that it's somehow coming between us. That's really what I'd like to encourage you to see, is that the technology doesn't have to come between you and your children. It can actually, be a much more organic process that involves everybody learning together and solving problems together as they come up. And yeah, it's a really, really interesting journey taken from that perspective, rather than from a us versus them, or me versus technology. sort of perspective. So I think that's about all that I had to talk about at the moment, but I'd very much like to open it up to any questions you have, or any comments, or any issues that you'd like to talk about that have come up in your family, or yeah, might come up in the near future. Anybody got anything they'd like to share? Has there been any change of perspective since last week, or since you've started this course? Have you noticed any shifts? You can unmute if you wish to talk. Hi. Hi. Yeah. Oh, I can't hear you.
Sorry.
I mean, I can hear you a little bit, but not very clearly.
How's that?
It's a little bit better.
Is that better?
I think I can just hear you, yeah.
I might sign. Would it be easier if I sign out and go back?
No, I can't hear you. Sorry. I don't know whether the others can hear you. No. Have you got a microphone? I don't know. Oh, she's gone. Oh, maybe she's going to try and connect in another way. Okay, well, maybe somebody else would like to say something while we're waiting. Nope, you're all good. Everything's sorted. This is amazing. Everybody's like, no, we're all good. We don't have any problems anymore. This is fantastic. I'm very pleased. I really am. But maybe you could share something about how you don't have any problems anymore, if that's the case. Liz, do you want to say something? Come on. Oh.
There we go. Hello.
Hello.
Oh, I don't know what to say. I think just to say this is going to be like a journey or a process, and I feel like I've taken that first big step, and that brought up a lot of stuff for me, which I've been working through. So I've found the last, I don't know, 4 weeks really challenging personally, but the kids playing computer stuff is fine. It's just my own beliefs, and that I'm, open up a can of worms for me, I suppose, that I'm slowly working through.
Yeah.
What else can I say? Yeah, we've used the creative problem solving a little bit in our family. I find it hard for that. Maybe it's a bit of a one that you need to practice. The kids seem a little not hesitant, but just getting them to throw I'm open to hear anything, but getting them to throw in ideas sometimes is hard.
Yeah.
And if my husband's involved, he just wants to kind of tell them what to do and move on. So trying to facilitate that process so it is all equal.
Yeah.
I think I feel a little bit hesitant actually about that.
Well, it does take practice. It takes quite a lot of practice, and actually, restating what your objective is, that you want to find a solution that everybody's happy with, and you want everybody to be involved, because that way you'll find the best solution for everybody. If you need to restate that, I know I did lots and lots and lots of times, and we had to practice because, well, actually the kids took to it much more easily than my husband and I often, because, we've got all that programming, and also, to some extent, we would have the tendency to actually agree to things that we didn't honestly think would work for us as well. So we would sometimes even allow ourselves to be sort of steamrolled into something that we weren't happy with. So we had to sort of really notice that tendency as well. So it does take practice, but it is really, it depends on the individuals concerned as to how useful it is in your family. You might not find that those sort of conflicts come up very much, or you might find that your kids are actually okay with your husband or somebody basically saying, no, this is what we're going to do. And, they might be willing to go along with a certain leadership role, let's put it that way. My sons weren't really cooperating with that leadership role. I mean, to some extent, yes, but not always. So it really, really depends on the family dynamics as to whether you're going to find that useful. But if your kids are really determined and spirited and hate being told what to do, then it's absolutely essential, So, yeah.
Yeah, I think that this was something I was reminded of today, reading something out. This process, that's about computers and my kids and me, is really unique to each family. And I think I just still feel really open to, what that may look like for us, even though at the moment the kids are quite freely playing computers and I'm supporting that and working through my own stuff in my own way. I think I just still feel like there's still a bit of a journey to us finding what really does work for everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why I wanted to introduce this tool of creative problem solving, because it will look different in every family. And, the needs of different family members are going to be different, and the solutions you come up with are going to be different, and they're going to change over time. So I really didn't want to be in a position of saying, this is the way to go, because there is just no one size fits all in this situation at all. It's just such a personal journey. But to me, it's more, I guess, choosing the values that underpin that journey, for me. What type of relationship do I want? Do I want to have a relationship where I'm responding to my own fears or acting on my own fears and judgments and getting pulled into conflict by those fears? Or do I basically want to prioritize having a peaceful and respectful relationship that's not driven by that fearful or that inner critic or, you know, the voices in my head. So that's a value choice, you know, that I made. And, you know, everybody will make their own choices and has their own inner sort of compass to guide them as to those values and those choices. So, yeah, it sounds like you really dived in and you're doing that inner sort of investigation, which is wonderful. And it is a bit of a can of worms always, you know, because you just sort of take the lid off and you go, oh my goodness, there's all this stuff that I wasn't really aware that was there.
I'll just quickly add to the homeschool reporting stuff. So I'm in Queensland and I've been, we've been homeschooling for 4 years. So I've done a bit of reporting and we do work samples. So we still have to put a plan in, but we provide work samples, and I've been able to do so many things around Minecraft. So, you know, maths, work samples, design and technology, pretty much any writing that they do relates to, you know, a story about Minecraft or a guidebook about Minecraft. Or so computers has really linked into our reporting, and I just feel a lot more comfortable with that. Just being able to show that it's valid what they're doing and they are learning stuff through this.
Absolutely. And in fact, they're using Minecraft in many schools now as well. So it's, you know, we can see ourselves as leading the way in terms of really getting the benefit of this technology for our children. And often, I mean, if you read the document that I put in, you may have already read it, that the parents report on the benefits of gaming. Some of the things that kids have got into is just really astonishing. You know, they've over time, because some of the people who were talking, you know, who shared their journey with their kids, they've just taken such incredibly diverse directions, but gone into really amazing directions and depth with their learning in relation to technology. So yeah, it's certainly coming into schools, but it's like they've got a time lag because they have to go through all the institutional processes to get the curriculum authorized and blah, blah, blah. Whereas as home educators, we don't need to do that. So we can just have the benefit of all these amazing resources and see where our kids go with it. It's very exciting.
Thanks.
Anyway, thanks very much for sharing. Thank you. So I don't know whether we can get better sound. Amanda, do you want to try again? No, I can't hear you at all. Nope. Nope. Okay. Sorry. I don't know what's going on because you're not muted. It must be something about your computer. Oh.
Just a thought, Amanda. Do your headphones have a mic? Because it might be you're connected to your headphones, but that means that the mic's not working. Maybe disconnect the headphones from the phone.
Yeah, can you? Yeah. There should be a little audio thing, microphone thing on your screen. You should be able to select there's a little arrow next to the microphone.
I'd say that was working, but what I think might be happening is it might be your settings that you're connected by Bluetooth to your headphones.
Yeah.
So you might need to switch the Bluetooth off or just go with the phone.
Oh, we had some sound, but it wasn't. No, we can't. Have you found the little, is there a little arrow or something that allows you to select the microphone? Oh, okay. Something is up with your computer. Okay. Well, you could type your question if you wanted to, if you had a question, or okay, we'll wait. Feel free to type something if you want to. Okay, did Dave, did you wanted to share something?
Yeah, no, I'm still a little, I guess, overwhelmed from my perspective at the moment. I don't know if it's to do with the age of the kids, but there's a lot of gaming going on. I absolutely get where you're coming from in terms of what you can learn from them and stuff. I don't spend enough time with them yet to come up with great things. Like you mentioned, like maths with Minecraft, and I'm like, oh, what's that? And working out like how many squares to do this or how many squares to do that. I'm not a great Minecraft lover, so I struggle with that. I've seen more maths from when they're trying to work out how much they need to spend on add-ins and things at the moment.
Yeah, well, that's all good, you know.
Yeah, I think I'm going through a tough phase at the moment, in as much as because there's a lot of YouTube being consumed as well. Looking at the games that we're playing, they're sort of 7 and 9. We also watch a lot of YouTube about the games. Certainly, they pick up a lot of information on how to do things, like, undoubtedly, but also they get exposure to so many more games that they want to try and download.
Yeah.
Like, I feel it's out of control with how many we're signing up to.
Yeah.
You know, and trying to monitor it and then trying to unsign off from them, because otherwise we're going to be stuck in paying monthly for something that we don't ever want to play again.
Yeah.
You know, the cost bits feels like it's getting a bit out of control. And because, of course, we've got 2 of them.
Yeah.
Youngest always has to do exactly what the eldest is doing, even if you're not that interested. She has to have it. So, yeah, the in-app purchases, I get getting on hers a little bit, and that's on a desktop as well as just from an iPad.
Yeah.
Because we've got them set up so they can use a computer.
Yes.
But there is a lot of genuine interest. I know it's ticking their buttons.
Yeah.
So all their boxes, sorry, but I'm just struggling a bit with feeling at this point to take stuff out that I feel fits like a traditional schooling context. And but there's examples out there. I can go and find, like you suggested, you know, the sources. I feel I can probably do that. Yeah, I'm just finding it hard myself still.
Yeah.
Adjusting, I think.
Yeah, I understand that. I totally understand that. I found it really, really hard to adjust to, because, you know, it's so different to what we used to, and the way we learned. And yeah, and it is a bit overwhelming at times. But
yeah, I mean, I do think almost daily at the moment we're getting new games that are being asked for. You know, so I think today The Sims came up. You know, and I can vaguely remember news reports about when The Sims was out and it was really popular years ago. So that's my only kind of awareness of it. Like, my wife Lisa she's never been into gaming. Neither of us are really.
Yeah.
But I've got slightly more on the periphery, some awareness of it. So, you know, so moving around from one thing to another every day, just it's really hard.
Yeah.
If we're going to allow them to explore, I can't say no. That's it. You're going to stick on Minecraft, or you're going to stick on, you know, I say Roblox, but to be honest, that's a complete that's just a structure for thousands of games anyway. So
Yes.
yeah, it's very hard in controlling what they do interact with.
Yeah. It's very hard when you're trying to control anything really with kids, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, there are obvious benefits of them trying lots of different games, because then they'll get exposed to it's. If you thought about it in terms of, gosh, if we walk into a library and they picked up 20 books off the shelves, then you wouldn't be freaked out, because you would think, okay, there's 20 amazing experiences, learning experiences they could have in each of those books. And they're not going to do it all. They're not going to read them all at once, but some they might pick up and really get something amazing out of. Others they might just glance at and put away. And yeah, I mean, obviously there are limitations that you might still want to have regard to. For example, your financial limitations, as a family, or time limitations in terms of how many hours there are in a day. There are things that that are relevant, in terms of natural limits to what can be explored, but it's worth investigating, for yourself. Is this just a fear about the future, that I'm experiencing at the moment? Is it like a fear that they won't, that they'll just keep skipping all over the place? And I don't know, what do you think's going on there for you?
Yeah, I think there's two things there. I think you're right. There is the fear of the future. There's also the current, where I feel the financials got the realms of going out of control when we're looking at sort of games that are $20 to $50, and every day we want a different one. And so, I can cope with that to some extent in terms of talking to them, suggesting this, do a demo, etc.
Yeah.
But that's only lasting so long, and then we get thrown back in your face that, we never let them do things, never let them have what they want. What you just said about the library just sparked a really good thought, actually. I should look back, because libraries used to do games on, I think, computers on CD-ROM, and also on like PlayStation, some of the stuff.
Yeah, they do.
We don't have, I'm not sure we have the right hardware, but I'll have to have a look. We've got a Switch, but that doesn't get used because everything at the moment is all geared around iPad or the computer. So
yeah,
I might have, because we're watching it on YouTube, and so it's the latest thing, or the latest within about 2 years, or whatever the current YouTube videos that come up on the scrolling from the people that we like watching. So it's not really the kind of like classic, not classical arcade games, but like a PlayStation 4 games and stuff don't necessarily fall into that category of what they're looking at.
Yeah.
But that might be an idea, because maybe if could maybe look at trying to get some that way and get some interest elsewhere.
Well, one of the, I mean, the sort of cost involved was certainly an issue for me, and it was something that we did sort of take to that creative problem solving process. And one of the solutions that we came up with was we ended up adopting, Steam was really a good one. And I'll come back to your question soon, but I just noticed.
Yeah, we just put Steam onto the computer, actually, yeah.
Steam was fantastic because they have sales fairly regularly where they massively discount their games. But the other thing was we ended up basically giving each child a very generous pocket money allocation per week, which was to cover Lego and gaming and whatever else they wanted to spend their money on. But basically, it was sort of like, okay, you can buy whatever games you like, but we're going to limit it to $30 a week each per child, and that's the most we're prepared to spend on stuff for you particularly the gaming and stuff. So they actually, I mean, we tried to make it as generous as we could, you know, within our budget, and they knew that we were, you know, trying to be generous. And
What sort of
they actually were really fine with that. They were really, really fine, and they would save up for the sales on Steam, or, you know, figure out how to get things. And yeah, it worked well for us over a long.
What sort of age did you introduce that?
Young. I don't
Right.
know. Yeah.
Because our oldest, probably, she gets that far better, and she's kind of capable of saving. She's a lot better with it. The youngest doesn't really have a great concept of her money. As soon as she gets it, she spends it, and then just wants more. You know, that's it for this month, or you wait until this next week, or you won't. And she'll be back at you an hour later. So it just in one ear and out another. You know, she's like looking for jobs to do to be able to buy this, that, and the other. So, but yeah, we've kind of got that to some extent. But maybe we need to be. Maybe it does need to be weekly. I don't know. Well, I think maybe a month seems to be too long for them, I think.
Yeah, weekly was really good for us because, you know, they knew they were going to get some more soon. And also, you know, it was a learning process. It certainly took a lot of talking about it, and a lot of reinforcement, and a lot of sort of negotiation about what was included in that amount and what wasn't, and where exceptions could arise, and all that sort of stuff. But basically, you know, they were fine with that over a period of time. So, you know, that's just a possibility. I can see Amanda has said that they do that with their kids. So, yeah, showing in visuals is a really good idea. You know, we would actually put, you know, charts on the fridge, or, you know, there are various ways you can.
Funny, we spoke about that just the other day, actually. We talked about doing like a bar chart to show the money and to show it going down for our youngest.
Yeah.
Because I say it's monthly, but I'm thinking about the app. Some of the apps that we've got, because you're a member, they give you an amount monthly. So they get that anyway, because we've signed up to things, which is over and above their pocket money, and they get pocket money each week. But I still don't think it's tangible enough. So yeah, we've been talking about how to make that more tangible for them in the games.
Subscription stuff is a real challenge. Some of that just gets way out of hand, but yeah, that's a challenge for everybody, keeping track of all that stuff, isn't it? I still.
It is. I mean, the one good thing we've definitely made sure that they can't do their own purchase. So, seen so many horror stories about when people don't realise.
Oh, absolutely.
And they run up bills. That's not something they're able to do. We've got full control over that. So that's one saving grace for sure. Otherwise, God knows what we would have spent.
That's one of those situations where it's really, really useful to be like zoomed in and to have that close connection with your kids, so that you can see what they're doing. They're telling you what they're doing. You're involved. So they're not sort of in a separate room, you know, spending your life savings or sneaking stuff or whatever. It's actually all out in the open. That's why my kids always were playing their games in the middle of the lounge room on a screen, so everybody could see exactly what was going on. And there was always this openness around what they wanted and what we wanted, and they never felt they had to hide anything, you know, in terms of sneaking to buy things or whatever. It was always like, oh, can I have this? Can we do that? And I'd say, well, no, not at the moment, or not till next week, or wait till you've saved up enough pocket money, or, you know, it was just yes, let's work out how we can get what we want. Let's work out how you can get what you want. But it might be a matter of what time frame that happens in. Or if we can't get it out of your pocket money, you know, let's work out how you can get it for Christmas or your birthday, or ask, you know, your grandparents to pay for it, or, you know, coming at it from a point of view of, yes, I want you to have what you want. Let's just work out how that's going to happen, or when that's going to happen, and also I want to get what I want too, which is, you know, enough money for the basic, you know, needs of our family to be catered for as well. So it's actually really amazing to open up that whole money thing to a transparent family process. That was actually a really interesting part of our whole journey with home education, was to, you know, talk about money and where it's coming from and where it's going to and how we're going to, you know, figure this all out. And both of my kids have become very savvy around money because it's been so openly discussed, and they've had their own money for, you know, a long time. So yeah, one of my sons is like really, really into saving his money now. Like he's got thousands of dollars saved, thousands, and he's got his own business online selling Lego. And the other son is much more free and easy. You know, it comes and goes, and it's really not he's not into saving, but he's also very aware of the process of it coming and going, and he's got a job, and he's really pretty relaxed and confident around money issues. So there's lots of benefits. And of course, just dealing with money in games is a great way for kids to learn about money and economies and budgeting and transactions and interest and all the sort of stuff, you know, that goes on in these online games. Is an amazing learning opportunity, and more so if you're there answering questions and watching what's going on, rather than you know, just sort of closed down because it's too scary or overwhelming, which I understand can happen. So I might just come back to, thanks very much, Dave, for your sharing. I'll just come back to Amanda's questions. She said, all I was going to say was that the negative self-talk resonates with me so much, and I believe it is my biggest issue at the moment. Yes, thank you for sharing that, Amanda. It certainly was my biggest issue. Yeah, I understand. And hopefully the more we're actually open about what's going on in our heads and bring that to awareness, and also share with each other that we struggle with this, it's like the more we open up about it, the less hold it has on us. So that's one of the things I'm passionate about. Have you looked at Minecraft educational? No, because my kids always just played the PC version. I have girls the same age. YouTube stresses me sometimes, but mainly because I'm worried about how they will be manipulated and their perception of things being altered by who they watch on YouTube. Yes, well, this is an issue that that has been raised by a couple of parents during this course, is the type of content that our kids are exposed to, and the influence that the type of content has on them. And I think it's a really important issue to talk about. And again, I suppose the more we're connected with our kids and the more we're seen as allies and friends, if you like, in terms of who people they can talk to about what they're really into. You know, if they can open up to us and really say, look, I've been watching so-and-so on YouTube and blah, blah, blah. You know, if they can really share with us what's going on without feeling there's this judgment coming at them, or without feeling like you're an adversary or somebody who's trying to shut it down, then if they do have issues that come up for them about their their perception of themselves or relationships, or, if things sort of go a bit wonky, then they're going to share it with you, because you're the person who's there and you can have an open conversation with them. And ultimately, it's going to happen whether it's them watching stuff on YouTube or being exposed to different ideas and concepts through their friends or just out in the world. Our kids are going to get ideas and get exposed to things. For example, one of my sons did watch a huge amount of YouTube for quite a long time, and he ended up getting really interested in politics, and he ended up getting some really interesting political opinions that were very different to my political opinions and my husband's political opinions. So, we had some really interesting conversations about that. And in a way, it was a really interesting process for all of us, because he was following his interests and his passion, and kids do that, and they're not going to end up agreeing with your politics and your particular worldview, or whatever the issue may be. They're going to go off in their own direction, and either you can resist it and judge it or try and shut it down, or you can just have the conversation and be open. And we had some really interesting conversations, and I was sort of sitting there thinking, I really hope this passes. I really hope he doesn't stick with this particular set of political beliefs. But of course things have changed, because he was 13 or 14 or something then, and he's changed enormously, as people do in their teens. So yeah, I'm sorry we can't have more of a conversation now about this, but I hope what I'm saying is of some relevance to what you wrote. Here we go. Oh, I see. You wrote, at the moment, your eldest is convinced she's fat due to watching something silly on YouTube. Yes. Yeah, well, that happened to this son of mine who watched YouTube. He actually was convinced he was fat. And also he watched a whole lot of videos on health and diet and stuff. And when he was 12, he put himself on a diet, and he designed an exercise program for himself. And he got me to go out exercising for 2 hours with him every day. And he refused to eat any junk food. He said, no more sweets, no more chips, no more soft drink. I'm only going to eat healthy food from now on. And I'm like, what am I supposed to feed you? You've been eating all this other stuff for years and years. So yeah, it was sort of like, for him, it was actually a positive thing. It's sort of like, I'm going to, get healthy. But from an outside point of view, it could have easily been interpreted as, oh my goodness, this child is, got a problem, because he's changed his diet, and he's really, he was pretty obsessive about getting out and doing this exercise. But I was there for the whole ride. He lost 20 kilos. He was actually quite big, before this. He lost 20 kilos in about 3 or 4 months. And I think I didn't lose quite that much myself, but I lost quite a bit myself. So, yeah, I think the danger is we blame the technology, and we try and, remove it or limit it or whatever. But to me, it's not the technology that's to blame. In fact, there isn't really anything to blame. It's just that ideas come from outside into our children's world, whether it's from YouTube or friends or wherever. It's going to come from somewhere. And I want to be the person that my children come to talk to about whatever is bothering them. And I'm only going to be that person if I'm seen to be on their side, or somebody that is willing to and able to listen without lecturing them or judging them or shutting them down or whatever. So the more I can put my fears and my judgments to one side or to question them and just be the person who will listen. Be the person who will listen and just hold the space for whatever is arising with my child. It's like they need a sounding board. They want somebody who will just, they can just go, bleh, you know, this terrible stuff is happening. I'm really anxious. Like there's been a lot of anxiety in my kids over the years as well. And there've been challenges to sort of hold the space and allow them to express that. But the more I have just been able to listen, and I call it listening in presence, because it's really listening without judgment, listening without interruption, then I found those sort of waves of anxiety, those waves of self-judgment, they pass, you know, and they pass much more quickly if we're not like hooking in with our own emotional reactions. So that's one of the things I actually talk about in my Joyful Parenting book and in the Joyful Parenting course, is that skill of actually being able to listen to our children and help them with their problems in a way that is genuinely helpful, rather than leaping in to try and fix it or to try and control it or to, you know, add some layer of judgment to it, but to actually really focus on listening and to focus on keeping that connection open. And often that also involves listening to our partners, because while, you know, any number of people in the family could be freaking out, and my husband really, you know, he's had his share of freaking out about things, and so have I. So it's sort of like we've got used to allowing the expression of those emotions in our family, and to, I guess I've been the facilitator mostly in terms of being able to listen and to be a sounding board, be the sort of, the thing I most aspire to is to be the eye of the storm, you know, to be the calm center, and all hell can be breaking loose out there. People can have all sorts of problems and tantrums and whatever. But if I can be the calm center and hold that peace and calmness, then everything else resolves so much more quickly and the storms pass. I really like to think of that sort of emotional intensity and our anxious or fearful reactions as like the weather, you know, it's like a storm that can come and then it will pass. So that's been the most, that's been a really helpful way for me to sort of deal with some of those issues. So I think, I don't know if there's anything else that anybody else would like to say or ask.
Yeah, just a quick one. Sorry, Amanda just sent me a message that was really good. Thank you, Amanda. But I wanted to ask her some more, and I was busy trying to jot it down and type it, and I'm realizing probably going to close the video down, so I won't get a chance to see an answer. Is it possible that you can, if people are willing, can we exchange emails and stuff? Because
well, there is a Facebook group. I don't know.
Right, sorry, Lisa's probably told me and I've not.
Yeah, so there's a Facebook support group that I set up for exactly that purpose, so people could have an ongoing discussion with each other.
Right.
But if everybody's not on Facebook, then I can actually, share emails, but I don't want to see. There's more people that are just here tonight, so I can't
No, I get that.
everybody's permission. But if you want to, if you can, I'm just trying to work out how to facilitate this.
That's okay, because now I've just photographed the screen. Sorry, anyone that was on it, but just so I could get Amanda's name. So if you're on Facebook, then I can do that through. We can do that through Facebook, and I can carry that on.
Okay. So if connections don't work through Facebook, let me know, and I can also just help you out with emails.
Right. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. So that was the idea, that there could be an ongoing discussion, because quite a few people who are doing this course are just watching the replay as well. So there could be other questions and comments that come up, and that would be a really useful forum to talk about those things if you can do that. Okay, is there anything else? Nope. Okay, well, thank you so much for your participation and your sharing of your journey. It's just really, really lovely to have this open conversation, and I hope what I've shared has been helpful. And of course, there's always more sort of depth and detail that you can get into, and I do have other resources, as I said, other courses and the book and the articles, which hopefully can give a bit more of that depth if you need it. And there's the other people who are here and who are doing this course, which that's an amazing resource in itself, in terms of sharing your experiences, getting some feedback, getting some ideas. The more we can connect with each other in this journey, the easier it is for everybody, because we are sort of a bit out on a limb here in terms of mainstream society. So the more we can support each other along the way, the easier it'll be. That has certainly been my experience, and that's really why I want to share my journey with you, because I want it to be easier for you, really, and for our gorgeous children too. So thank you so much, and I look forward to whatever contributions or questions you have after this, and I'll probably be sending a form sometime in the next week or so to get some feedback from you on the course as well. So thank you very much. So good night. I hope to keep in touch with all of you. Bye. Bye-bye.